right, so the first step with making these coasters is putting something on the back that's going to catch the drips. So for anything that's round or has irregular edges, I like to use latex. And I find it gives a better seal than tape. So even on things with straight edges, a lot of times I'll use latex. So all you do is just take a little sponge brush and just brush it on. And you want to put it on fairly thick. You don't want it super thin, otherwise it's harder to get off. So yeah, the thicker you put it on, the easier it is to get off. So I just go around all the sides and put a good layer of latex on, and then I let it dry. And this particular brand that I use dries clear, so once it's clear, I know it's good to go. So they are all dry now, and now what I'm going to do is I want to get these off of the table. So I'm just taking little glue dots and putting them on the bottoms of little 1-ounce cups, and I'm sticking those onto the coasters so that they'll stay. If I'm working with a heavier piece of wood or stone, I don't use the glue dots because the weight of the piece will keep it on top of the cup. But these are so lightweight that just the tiniest thing, even blowing it with the heat gun, will blow it right off the cup. So I found that works better if I somehow stick it down. And I've tried using tape, but tape isn't level. And I always end up with my piece of wood like tilted a little bit. So the glue dots seem to work really well. All right, now I want very rich, deep colors on these coasters. And when you pour onto a surface, a lot of times, even if your resin is opaque, it's still going to be slightly transparent, especially when it drips down the sides, over the edges. It's not going to cover them completely. So I am just putting a layer of paint on each of these just to make sure that there isn't going to be any wood grain showing. And then especially around the edges of these, because these were actually burned around the sides, so the edges of them are like a really dark brown. So I want to make sure they've got some color on them. Okay, so I've got everything ready to go. For each one of the coasters, I am using 2 different colors. And the first color that I'm putting down is a pigment paste. And I have each one of them mixed up so that they are opaque. I want them as dark and as rich as possible. So I just put the pigment paste down first, and I'm just spreading it out, making sure it's getting to all the edges. And I do that as the first step. And then I'm just going to come in with the heat gun, pop some bubbles, and spread the resin a little bit. I want to warm it up and thin it out and spread it so that it goes over the sides. And then also by heating it up, when I pour the second layer on here, which is going to be the mica powder, the temperature difference is actually going to help cause some of the effects that you see. So having the warm resin and then pouring the cold resin on top creates some interesting effects too. And I try to pour the mica in kind of a different pattern on each one. I try not to make them all the same. I want them to be a little bit more unique. So you can see I'm just kind of pouring in random shapes with that mica. So this is where the magic happens, is with the heat gun now. So I'm kind of just blowing the colors around. I'm trying to be really careful to not blend them. So I'm concentrating the heat gun on the areas that have more of the pigment paste and not so much on the mica. And then I'm going through with a little bit of a drizzle. This is just a silvery white mica. And again, a little more heat gun, and I'm just using that to kind of disperse those sparkles throughout, but I don't want to lose those areas of the pigment paste. So I'm just making sure to keep changing the angle of the heat gun. I don't want to just blow everything in one direction. Just trying to make it look a lot more random and natural. Here is a close-up of the results. So everything is still freshly poured. It's going to move around a little bit as it cures, but for the most part, this is how they'll look when they're finished. There might be a little more crackling that shows up, a little bit more cells that pop out as the bubbles rise. I will come through a couple more times with the torch and just pop bubbles in the next half hour or so. Okay, so now I'm just prepping the surface for the decal. So I wiped it down with a lint-free cloth, but then I'm just going to go through with a piece of tape and make sure I'm getting rid of any dust or hair, any little debris, because I want the decal to be as smooth as possible. And here I am getting ready to put the decal on. So when I put the decals down, I like to try and place the center down first and then kind of let the rest of it fall. Using the little squeegee to push it out from the center. Just get everything stuck down really well. Make sure there's no bubbles or any loose spots. And then just peeling off the transfer tape. And I like to go slow. I just want to make sure that I'm not going to accidentally take up the decal with it or rip anything. And there it is with the decal on. Beautiful. So now I want to add a little bit of detail to the horse. So I'm using this mirror leaf and glue. So I'm just going to be painting on some details like the mane and the tail and some of the features of the horse, just to give it a little bit of dimension. And I'm going to be painting that on with the glue and then applying the silver leaf over it to give it that 3D look. And then once the glue is dry, it takes about 15 minutes. And I just come in with the leaf and just press it down into the glue. And it sticks just where the glue is applied. And when I peel it away, I've got some beautiful 3D features added to the horse. And it's time for top coat. So I'm just putting about an ounce of clear on each one of these and then spreading it around with the stick, making sure it goes all the way to the sides. And then I'm going to come in with the heat gun and blow it around a little bit, thin it out, get it started where it's going to start overflowing the edges, because you want the resin to run off and you want to make sure that it runs off evenly all the way around the coasters. And then I'm just going to come in with my toothpick and I'm going under the coaster. I'm not actually scraping the edges, I'm going under it to pick up any of the bigger drips. So here's what it looks like after the clear is cured. And now it's time to clean up the back. So this is actually pretty easy. If you use the latex, which I showed you at the beginning, and you just go around, you just have to warm it up with your heat gun. So I just go around it a couple times with the heat gun, get all of it nice and warm. You don't want to overdo it. You don't want to melt anything, but you want to get those drips nice and warm. And then I just take a paint scraper and just get underneath it. And you can see how easily all those drips just slide right off. They're just coming right off of that latex. Super easy. And then the next part is to just remove the latex. It's super easy. You just kind of roll it with your thumb and it just comes right off. I found it is easier to get off if you paint the wood first. But since I'm going to be sanding lightly after I remove the latex, I didn't want to paint because then I'd just be sanding the paint off and I'd have to paint again. So if you're going to be sanding, I would say don't bother painting. But if you know that you're not going to do anything to the back, put a layer of paint on there first, and it does make it a little bit easier to remove. But even still, it's not hard to get off. You can see it just rolls right off. And then I'm just using some 180 grit sandpaper, and I'm just very, very lightly filing. You can feel just the tiniest little resin lip from where the latex and the resin met. So I'm just filing that off. And you almost don't even need to do it. I'm just extra picky, so I like to have that extra smooth. And now I'm just gonna put a coat of paint on the back. This is just to make it look a little bit nicer. Obviously the top side of the coasters are beautiful, but I like to have the underside nice too. So I'm just using the same color blue that I used as the base coat on the top side, and I'm just putting a little layer on the back. And the last step is to add the cork. So this is just a peel and stick cork backing. It's real simple, easy to use. So I'm just center it as best as I can on the underside here, stick it down. And then I like to put my logo on my pieces. So in this case, I'm using some permanent ink with a stamp. So I'm just gonna stamp my logo right in the middle. And if you found this video helpful, I would really appreciate if you'd subscribe and share my content. I love making videos for everyone to learn from. So thanks so much for tuning in, and I will see you next time.